I called 2 games this weekend. I was in Boston for both of them Friday night. Mikal Bridges had a monster game. They came back from 28 down to beat the Celtics. And then last night, one of the best games I've ever called, maybe the best game I've ever called, not me personally, like my calling, but just in terms of the game itself. Double overtime thriller. Knicks were down 14 at one point. Boston was down 11 at one point. They came back, forced overtime. And the Knicks, of course, playing without Jalen Brunson, who woke up with a sore foot. And look, I think the Knicks are legit. I think Knicks fans should be excited. This is the best team they've had in a long, long time. And I don't know kind of what their ceiling is, but I just think it's a very enjoyable team to watch.
So over the last 3 months, they're 29-14. They're number 2 in offense, number 9 in defense. They've been number 1 in net rating on this 9-game winning streak. At what point, more importantly, with sort of like the last 3 months thing, they've been playing well for a while. Obviously, everyone's focusing on Josh. Not just because, I mean, he even said it. This winning streak is more than just Josh. A lot of guys have played great. But it's just a coincidence they've had this winning streak since he's gotten there. But this has been a team that basically since the end of November has been, one of the better teams in the NBA. I guess at what point do we start talking about them as, a dark horse potentially in the playoffs?
Well, the question when you look sort of at the top of the East and the 3 teams, Milwaukee, Boston, Philly, who feel like they could win a conference. Cleveland, of course, is a team that I really like. I don't know that it's this year, but I certainly think they're going to be contenders at some point in the very near future. The Knicks right now, a game back in the loss column of Cleveland for home court advantage in that 4 or 5 spot. Given the way Philadelphia, Boston, Milwaukee are playing, it's unlikely that either of those teams are able to catch and move up to at least the 3 seed. So that's probably going to be that first round matchup. Obviously, maybe Brooklyn gets hot, they sneak in there. But the way the Knicks are playing over the last 43 games, and you nailed it, they lose a game at home against Dallas by 21 on December 3rd. They've got a back-to-back. They play Cleveland the next night. And since then, 29-14, they win that game against Cleveland, and they're off and rolling. There's a few things I would just want to note here on the team. First of all, you mentioned Josh. He has been great. He shot the ball well, hit a big 3 late in the game last night. His shooting splits, New York versus Portland, are insane. 30% in Portland, 60%-ish in New York. I don't think he'll shoot 60% going forward, but give him some credit for just being able to knock down shots. The amount of plays that he makes, being at the game last night, offensive rebounds, back taps, loose balls, drawing fouls. It's just constant. He's a baller. Like his game is not. I wouldn't call his game pretty, but it gets it done, and he's a great asset to have on your team because he doesn't need the basketball. He can make plays if necessary. We saw that a lot last year with New Orleans prior to the trade to Portland, and just a heady player. And the other guy, of course, is Emmanuel Quickley, who basically during this stretch, I think his great play started around December 20th, but he's averaging over 16 a game. Had a huge game last night, over 40% from 3 since December 20th. And then the other point I wanted to make, in doing some research on the game yesterday, is just on Julius Randle. Julius Randle, arguably, and I think Jalen Brunson has a case too as well. Both those guys have cases for all NBA teams. Julius Randle, first in spot up makes, third in ISOs, and third in ISO scoring. Only Luka and Shea score more per game out of ISO than Julius Randle. But one interesting little nugget that I found in the research for the game was the Brunson-Randle combo. And I mentioned this on the broadcast, but what Jalen has done is alleviated some of that facilitating, playmaking, ball handling, point forward with Julius Randle. And Julius can make plays, but he's been able to focus more on scoring. And that combination, assist to score, Brunson to Randall, has the third most points of any assist to score duo. Only Embiid, Harden, and Halliburton Hield have more points. So what Jalen has done is not only alleviate some of the responsibilities of Julius Randle, but he's elevated his play. Give both of them some credit. And I think Jalen, we've mentioned him a ton. Jalen has really changed the entire culture, tone, makeup of this franchise. And he's underpaid. He's now underpaid.
He is officially underpaid. I wanted to ask about Quick. Obviously, you called the game last night, so you saw this firsthand. The thing that sort of stood out to me, played 55 minutes, played point guard 55 minutes. Besides all the big shots and everything like that he hit down the stretch, he had one turnover the whole time. Have you seen, many performances like that? It was pretty striking watching it on TV.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen great performances, and his was fantastic. The one thing that stood out, and they caught him a little bit on camera, but sitting courtside at half court, we got to see his reaction. And early in the game, when they were making their comeback, late in the game, in overtime, in double overtime, his joy and mannerisms and antics after every game, he was just out there having fun, playing loose, and he took advantage of an opportunity with Brunson being out. RJ made the joke, and I thought it was hilarious. He's like, I wonder what the sports science people are going to say about this performance. It doesn't come out after halftime, plays the whole second half, plays both overtimes, hit a ton of buckets. I will say this, Boston, I'm not worried. And being in Boston for a couple of days, you hear, the Celtics fans, they're not the same as the Philly fans, but there's definitely the same sort of passion and love, but also skepticism and hard truths. And a lot of these, I was walking out of the hotel this morning, and it's, the doorman's like, I don't like this team. I think there's just some, look, let's all pause. Teams do fluctuate a little bit here and there. They've been one of the best clutch teams in the NBA this year. That was an Achilles heel last year. I think at times, in being around Missoula too, in the 2 pregame interviews, at times, end of quarters, end of game, we saw it a little bit with that end of play at the end of the first overtime where they took too long to get into the set. And then there was another possession where they were trying to run their horns action, their V2 action, and they were trying to get Grant Williams as the third guy up there. He, miscommunication, and they had to call timeout. So there was some execution stuff, and that's something that Joe Mazzulla was talking about, the execution at the end of quarters, the execution at the end of a game, that I think it's just a matter of cleaning up. Because if they didn't have a guy like Jason Tatum, who in his career has 10 game-winning or game-tying buckets in the last 5 seconds of the game, the most in the NBA over that stretch, they have a guy that can score. We've seen Jalen Brown hit game-winning shot. They have 2 really elite shot creators. What stood out to me was Brogdon being out. That really stood out because he's a playmaker, he's a scorer, he's a defender. He can sort of calm units down that don't have Tatum in or that don't have Brown in. And so I want everybody in Boston to just pause. Your team is very, very good. Your team still has a chance to win a championship. It's just 2 games.
They just don't like losing to New York. If it wasn't the Knicks,
true.
If it wasn't the Knicks, it might be. I was going to ask about the Knicks defensively, because right now they're 4th in offensive rating in the league. They're 116.4, 7th in net. The defense has improved, but it's still it was hard to tell, over the stretch. But it's still not probably where it needs to be in the upper echelon of the league. What do you think they need to do, having seen them up close a couple times now in the last couple of weeks, to sort of improve on that end?
I mean, I like what they're doing. I mean, again, I had them 10th. You said 2nd and 9th. You may have not updated stats. But
yeah, maybe that was from yesterday.
They're 10th in this 43-game stretch in the league. I think some of that was, I think Mitchell Robinson at times being hurt, that really affects them. The thing with New York is they get to the foul line. They're number one in the league in second chance points. I think they're first or second. They're second. I'm sorry. Houston's number one. They're second in offensive rebounding rate. So they're going to get a lot of extra possessions. They shoot threes. They're sort of league average in percentage, but they're top 10 in attempts. Like they do enough offensively that I really believe they do enough offensively. They control the pace. They're one of the slower teams in the league. They're 27th in pace going on yesterday. They do enough offensively that I think they're okay just being fine defensively. And I actually don't think they're fine. I think they're good defensively. The sort of addition of Josh Hart to me, I didn't look it up this morning, but I know in the 8 games that he has played in New York prior to last night, like they had a great defensive rating with him on the court. He's playing 28 minutes. They had a great offensive rating. His net rating was 25 per 100 possessions in his first 8 games. I don't know what it is after last night. I didn't have time to look it up, but to me, it's like their defense is going to normalize even more, I think, towards into that top 10 area. So the schematically, I like what they do. I talked with Nikias and Steve on Twitter randomly because they were showing clips from games, and there's this thing that happens with some teams that's driving me crazy, and it's when you're in a drop, like a legit drop, not like up to touch drop where then you retreat. You're in a drop and you're playing the pick and roll 2v2, and the low man actually comes over early and comes all the way over to the middle of the paint to help. But you're in a drop, which means the guard has no pressure as he comes off the screen and can zip a pass across the corner. Like, you don't need to be there. The whole point of drop coverage is so that the roll man doesn't get behind the big, so that you don't have to overhelp with the weak side. And in calling Knicks games early in the season, they did that some. They were giving up 3-pointers that way. I don't see them doing that as much anymore. So again, I don't know if that's something that Tibbs saw in film or changed, or maybe it was just the one game I called and it happened 3 times. And I'm like, why are they doing this? But I think defensively they're fine.